Good afternoon, and welcome to this meeting of the Kingman City Council work session at 4:00 p.m. on Monday, May 10th, 2021. This is a work session meeting. The purpose of this is to provide the City Council with the opportunity for in-depth discussion and study of specific subjects. In this case, it will be a street maintenance workshop. Public comment is not provided for on the agenda and may be made only as approved by consensus of the council. In appropriate circumstances, a brief presentation may be permitted by a member of the public or another interested party if invited by the mayor or the city manager to do so. So today we're here to discuss the street maintenance, and staff along with NCE consultants will present street maintenance best practices to City Council. Since this is a work session and not a council meeting, the protocols of council do not apply, and so we can feel free to ask questions and discuss freely with the presenters. And with that, I'll turn it over to Manager Foggin.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, it is a pleasure to be here with you Monday afternoon. Today, what we have planned for you is we're going to be talking about our street maintenance practices. We're going to be talking about our policies surrounding street maintenance, and really, ultimately, what we hope to get done with street maintenance. And so, part of that, or a large part of that, is kind of best practices with regards to street maintenance. And so what I've invited Jack to do is put together a presentation with our consultant who's going to also be presenting, and then we've also invited our county partners to discuss a little bit about what the county's doing and what we've done to partner with them. So really the time will be Jack's. As the mayor said, we want to make sure if you have questions that we are getting those questions answered, and we certainly have the team here in which to do that. I think, and again, want to thank Sam and his team for all their help and for their willingness to be here, and Steve, for your time as well, for being here. Thank you for coming. And with that, Jack, we will turn it over to you.
Great, thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. As Mr. Foggin alluded to, we're going to talk a little bit of best practices, where we are, what we're doing. So I want to give you some updates on a project. Oh, pull it up too far, I pull it out, huh? All right, so I want to give you guys some updates on the project we're on. And some of this is some discussion that is good leading into parts of the project we're in, which is updating our current decision tree. So I'll give some more details as we go along in that. Next slide, Annie. I can't see. Oh, all right. Next slide, please. Okay, so presentation goals. Just talk a little bit. We're going to update you on our current network inspection. That we've had the inspection portion done, and so now we're starting into updating other portions, including the decision tree, and then some of our strategies to see if we can adjust those at all. We have NCE is here, and they're going to talk to you a little bit about that's all right, pavement distresses and their severities. And then we're going to review the treatment selection and best practices that we're using in here, or what we're proposing at this point. That's going to be the decision tree that we're going to talk through. And then also discussion on MAG 336. This has come up a couple times about contractors and developers chip sealing when they do and actually it calls for a slurry seal, but doing some type of a slurry or seal coat on asphalt that's been disturbed through development or utility. And then we'll talk a little bit about in-house versus contract work as well. Next slide, please. So I want to introduce our project team. Tonight we have with us Lisa Sin. Excuse me. She is the senior project manager for NCE. So she's the one that's kind of guiding this whole project. And then she has some of her team. They're not with us this evening or won't be speaking, but May Wee Lee. She's a project engineer. Linda Pierce is the principal. And then they had some engineering and field survey techs that were actually in Kingman. They were helping to collect the data that we're using to update our system, and that was Joseph DeLeon and John Zimmer. And as Mr. Foggin alluded to, we have a couple guest speakers who I'm very thankful are here, which is Sam Elters and Steve Latowski. Next slide, please. Just a couple updates on Kingman Statistics. Not a whole lot to give you here, but we're up from 434 lane miles up to 359. We went from 1.45 to 1.48 million, square miles of asphalt. Equates to about 4.58 million square yards. That's up from 4.4. So if you look at lane miles alone, that's about a 6% increase in our network size since the initial inventory we've done. We're still going through and finalizing that. QC has been done, but you're looking at about a 6% increase in our network. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to use this as like a visual term. So when we talk decision tree, this is what you're looking at. This is one that I just pulled out of a best practices manual. There's a handful of them out there, but they're all very similar. And so what it does is it breaks down the type of treatment that's going to be done based on the type of distress you're seeing in the asphalt. Maybe it's gator cracking, block cracking, pushing, rutting, shoving, whatever that is, and then the severity. And when you line those up, you look at, okay, this is the severity, this is the type of failure, and then that lines up the type of treatment you're going to do. So this is just a tool that helps us to budget and look at the treatments we're going to do. Now that always comes down to the project level, because the program is going to say, hey, based on these conditions and the severity I'm seeing, here's what the treatment recommendation would be. We as pavement managers are going to go out in the field, boots on ground, and look at it and say, yes, we agree, or no, we don't. Maybe we can go from, a heavy surface seal to maybe back that out to just a fog seal or some type of seal coat on the top. Next slide, please. So the second half of that equation is the PCI breakpoints. So what this does, again, is by functional class. So you can see we got arterial, collector, residential. There's some others down in there, but those don't necessarily apply to what we have. Excuse me. And so what it does the same principle, but now you're looking at the breakpoints. And we're telling it, okay, based on this breakpoint, when we do a inspection, that it's in this PCI category. So this is where it lines up the decision tree with a PCI category, or condition category rather. And those two work in conjunction inside there to help make those decisions and drive those budget scenarios we run. Just talk through these a little bit. You can see the breakpoint. So keep in mind, these are the top end. So look at the 4 and 5. That breakpoint, at that point, anything that falls below that 25 mark is going to fall into that condition category and whatever the treatment that is selected for that condition category. So anything 25 to 50 is going to fall into the next set, and so on and so forth. And you can see we've kind of changed these up a little bit. And so most of them are the same. We've already dialed back the residential areas a little bit, just based on loading and trying to save some money, quite honestly. These are the breakpoints that are currently shown in Street Saver in the management program we use. Excuse me, next slide. So I just wanted to give you guys a visual on what those breakpoints would look like. I tried to find something that was right at 80, and I didn't have anything, so I found the closest. This road, you can see, is overall in good condition. Maybe a little bit of light oxidation, no real cracks that you can look at, maybe some minor surface raveling, just some of the fines have peeled off. Good candidate for like a fog seal or some type of surface seal. Next slide, please. So this road is currently at a 70. This had HA5, that's the same product that you're seeing outside the chambers here that was applied, I think we're on 4 years now. There's some minor cracking in there. It's been sealed, but we're getting about to the time that it's due for another crack seal. Typically you're seeing that 3 to 5 years, something like that. The surface is still in really good condition. It's still tight. We don't have any water intrusion. It's just nice and dark, and we don't have any raveling or any of the material coming loose. Next slide, please. So this road is currently at a 50. This one, you can see it's got some more cracking in it, a little lighter gray. It's oxidized. Another one, this is actually a good candidate, or could be a good candidate for like HA5. You can use chip seal. There's a number of things. This road is still serviceable and overall in good condition. You don't see any base failures or anything else. Next slide, please. This one is not in great condition, so this is at the bottom end. This is a 25. This would be the next break point, and so it's only going to get worse from this point. You can see a lot of gator cracking in that. You can see a pretty significant amount of patching that's been done. What you don't see right now is some base failure, so overall, that's a good thing. It means we've got a structural base underneath that's still holding up, and we might be able to do some other treatments. Maybe this is a scrub seal, or we do a 2-component treatment. Some of those, the counties had luck with a SAMI, which is a membrane that helps absorb some of the stress, or a double chip, or something like that. But again, the good thing here is you don't see the base failure. As time goes on, we have so many cracks, you're gonna start to see water intrusion into that base material, and you'll actually start to see base failures as well. And that, you guys have driven around town and seen them. You got a divot in the road, or maybe the wheel path is rutted, stuff like that. Next slide, please. In short, both of those tools, the breakpoints and then also the decision tree, are used to help us choose the best treatment for the right road at the right time. That's both for cost and for life cycle, which ultimately comes back to cost. But we want to try and minimize too, if we can stay out of a neighborhood from being there every other year, every year, and try and extend that out and be there every couple years. One, we get a better life cycle cost, and two, we're not being such an impact to the residents. So right treatment, right road, right time. That's going to be the theme as we're going through this. Next slide, please, Annie. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Lisa Sin. Again, she's the Senior Project Manager for NCE. They're the consultants that are helping us through this current project we're in as far as updating the network. So Lisa, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
I can. Great. Thank you very much for being here, Lisa. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. So when you're ready to change your slides, just let Annie know and she can switch those around for you.
Well, thank you, Jack. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council members, staff, and members of the public. It is always a good thing for me and a good time to sit and talk about pavement condition. One of the things I have always felt, having been in this industry for almost 23 years, is when I smell asphalt, I know a road is getting repaired and somebody is making a road in better shape. So I always love to talk about that. Next slide. Some of the treatments, or excuse me, some of the distresses that Jack was talking about, I wanted you to see them kind of up close and personal. So this slide has the alligator cracking on it. It has block cracking, distortions, which if you ride down the road in your car, you feel bumps. You don't want them to be too large or that cup of coffee might end up in your lap. There's lineal cracking or transverse cracking. There are patches, and the patches in your city are much better than this one. There's also rutting, and that is caused by excessive loads on that wheel path that break down. There's also raveling, weathering and raveling. And this is an environmental distress. And so you'll hear a lot of talk about what is an environmental distress and what is a load-related distress. Environmental distresses, they do degrade the road, but not as quickly and not as harshly as load-related distresses. Next, please. The other side of this, and this just shows somebody out walking. We do our QC with walking inspections. You are using the Street Saver software, which is a very popular software. It was based on the micropaver software of about 30 years ago, but it has moved forward so much. We look at this ASTM protocol as being what is the basis for everything we look at in the street. We look at also, if you're doing walking inspections like this man is doing, we look at a 10% of the sampling area of a street section. So if your street's 1,000 feet long, we're going to look at 100 feet of it curb to curb. For what we did for the city of Kingman, we used what's called a semi-automated distress collection, and that's with a van. You may have seen the little van running around the city with cameras and all kinds. It looks like a Google Earth or Google Map type vehicle with all of the accoutrements on it. We use these hand in hand. The automated, because you're driving a little faster, you may not catch some of the low severity distresses. So we set up control sections out there so that we can calibrate not just the inspectors, but also the van to look for the smaller distresses, the lighter distresses. So we catch them all and give you a good look at what the actual condition is of your street. And Jack talked about a PCI, and a PCI is a pavement condition index. And what it's based on is 100, as he was showing in the decision tree, to a 0. Now, a 0 is not a street that is mud. I mean, it still has some life in it, not much, but a little, but it's reached the end of its design life. And that means when your engineers sit down and they say this road needs an overlay, they're going to project how many years they anticipate that treatment is going to last. And so when we get down to below 25, that street section is just reached the end of its design life. And it's not pleasant to drive on, but it's still something you can drive on besides dirt. Next slide, please. So some of the things that we did is we gathered up with Jack and his staff's help, the M&R records, the maintenance and rehabilitation that staff has done. We entered them into the Street Saver software. We're going to be doing analysis to find out, what these treatments did to improve the roads. We're also going to be looking at upcoming projects. We'll plug those in so that when we say the city has, say, $2 million to spend on their roads, they're going to get the road segments that the software is suggesting. And if there's any projects that are already being designed, we're going to stick those in there as well. As Jack mentioned, it's all based on the decision tree and the unit costs. And we're right there. We just had our decision tree meeting last week where we talk about the unit cost of the different treatments that you use. What are some potential other treatments that may be used? Is it effective? And the biggest one is, can you get that treatment in the city of Kingman? As much as I love Kingman, I've traveled through it many times going from New Mexico to California. There are things you can't get there. And so some of the treatments that would be really good may not be available within your area. And that's okay, because there's a plethora of treatments out there. So we're going to do a budget analysis. We will create a draft report for staff to review and comment on, and then we will provide a final report. Next, please. But I want to start off by talking about preventive maintenance. And preventive maintenance strategies are those minor type treatments that we can get away with putting down on the streets for pennies a square foot instead of dollars a square foot. So let's go to the next slide and we'll start talking about a few of them. We'll talk about how your streets deteriorate. When they're brand new, they're up at that 100 PCI, and over time, they will go down to a 0 unless you treat them. Notice on this curve that it kind of levels out somewhere around the green arrow, and then around the red arrow, the curve gets very sharp. So streets that are in good condition can carry that good condition for a long time, provided we're putting preventive maintenance treatments down and we're catching them before they go over that curve. So if we do preventive maintenance, it could be as little as $1, or if it gets down the curve, it could be as much as $10 a square foot. So it's always better if we can catch them on the upside of it, because it's going to be cheaper and we'll get more work done. Next, please. So in the preventive or proactive, we want to preserve the surface of the asphalt. We want it to stay in good condition as long as it can be. So we're going to address the light distresses, which would be a little weathering, some minor cracking, longitudinal and transverse cracking. We're going to put this treatment down that's going to retard some of that cracking and slow it down. And we want to reduce the time that we're going to have to get over to the heavier maintenance, the rehabilitation. We want to stay in the preventive maintenance as long as possible. There are corrective and reactive strategies, which is to restore the poor pavement to good condition. We restore streets that have had, for instance, in the city, if you have shopping centers where you have loaded goods coming into the city to drop them off for residents to purchase, that truck is loaded and the weight of that truck is going to bear down on the street sections. When they leave, they're a lot lighter, and so they don't have as much impact leaving the city. But those are the things we look at. Is it a street that is going to have some heavy loading for trucks? Your residentials always have trash trucks out there. Those can degrade the streets. We want to make sure that, as Jack was talking, that we cover up these cracks that start to develop. And so there's just a treatment called crack seal that can be put down, which helps to retard the cracks, helps to keep the water out there and all of the other materials out. And the longer we keep that out, the longer that street is going to last. Next, please. So as Jack talked about, the right treatment depends on, is the pavement going to handle that treatment? Is it in the condition that that treatment will improve it? Is the environment a part of it? Do we have a lot of climate? You get a lot of sun during the summer and you get a lot of heat. So that dries out that moisture that's in pavements. We're also talking about traffic. Your arterials get a lot of traffic. Life cycle costs, initially the maintenance cost is low, but as the street gets older, it starts to cost more. Then the last one, as I mentioned, is the treatments that we're talking about, locally accessible. And can you get it at a good price? Next. So these are some of the treatments that we'll kind of run through, give you an idea. There's crack seal, which I'm sure you've seen. There is a fog seal, which has been used in the city. It's a very light application. There's a slurry seal, scrub seal, all the way up to an ultra-thin bonded wearing course, which we'll talk about. Next, please. So pavement preservation materials, what is it going to be? Well, we're talking about asphalt binder. Is it conventional? Does it have polymers in it that modify it? And have they added crumb rubber to it to give it a little bit more life? There's the granular side of things, which is the aggregate. We're not talking big rocks, we're talking small rocks. We're talking sand that may be there, so very fine, and reclaimed asphalt or wrap. There's additives that can be put in this to help extend the life of that treatment, which is glass fibers and blast furnace slag. And I'm sure a number of these things you've never heard of, but don't worry, you can always ask Jack about them, or you can ask me and I'll help you, or Jack will help you to understand what they are. Next, please. So crack seal, by definition, is flexible. It's rubberized asphalt material that's placed in that crack. And as you see in this picture, this is not the way you do crack seal. And I remember taking this picture in the county of Santa Barbara here in California, And I couldn't believe that somebody actually crack sealed the road, that it looked like this. It's not just a waste of crack seal, it's a waste of time. That doesn't work. The purpose is, though, to prevent the water and things that you can't compress, like small rocks, anything that kind of blows in that crack. When the asphalt contracts, if those rocks are in between it, it creates a bigger crack. So we want to make sure that when we do the crack seal, we get the materials out and we lay it down in the appropriate manner. Next, please. Definitely don't want to do it like this. Next. So crack seal, what are the pros? It's inexpensive. It's the most inexpensive treatment that you have. It could be $1 a lineal foot. And when they go down there, or it could be as little as 50 cents a lineal foot. So as long as you can put that in there and you can keep the road from cracking, that's a very cheap way to help maintain your streets. It does reduce materials getting in the crack and making it bigger. What are the downsides? It doesn't really improve the structural capacity of the road. It's not something that's going to help make it stronger. It's not always, as you noticed in that previous slide, it's not always good looking on the street. It's kind of ugly. In the table to the right, you see the different types of treatments that, different types of distresses that can be found. You can see how this crack seal can help improve it by the green. It's marginally helpful in the yellow, and red, it doesn't help with that distress at all. So for this one, it does help with the fatigue cracking because it's closing that crack up. And it does help with the lineal cracking and keeping the moisture out. Next. A fog seal is a very light application of a diluted emulsion, asphalt emulsion. And it doesn't have any kind of rocks in it or aggregate in it. It's just the application, the diluted asphalt emulsion. And the asphalt emulsion is what holds the rocks together. The purpose of using this is, number one, it does help to prevent the oxidation of the streets. It does help you if your street lines, your center yellow markings and your white markings for your lanes, if those have faded, this will help to bring out the sharpness of them. It does seal the pavement from wear, not from load, but just from wear. And it will reduce the weathering and raveling on it. Next. So a fog seal, you see, we've lost the fatigue cracking there. It's mainly good for moisture damage and top-down cracking. It's inexpensive. It only requires one truck that will distribute that treatment over the road, and it does prevent the water from getting down into the cracks. The downside is it doesn't last long. It wears off fairly quickly. And if it's not put down at the correct rate, it can cause a problem for the traveling public by being pooled up. It becomes slick when it gets chilly outside. And that's not good for the traveling public who may be driving a little too fast and have to stop. And they won't be able to stop as quick as they normally would. Okay, next, please. Slurry seal. I'm sure you've all heard of a slurry seal. It's the mixture of this emulsion with various size aggregate in it. So, and when it says graded aggregate, your engineering team will say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do a type 2 slurry or a type 3 slurry. And that all gets kind of wound up in what is actually in there. But basically, it's some rocks inside of that emulsion, and it's applied to the ground. You can see the truck that applies it on the right, and it does seal the surface cracks. It does help to reduce the raveling, the oxidation, and it will fill some minor surface irregularities. You don't want to get it too thick, but it'll take care of the minor ones. Next. So Slurry Seal helps with the friction loss, linear cracking, moisture. It's smoother than a chip seal by far. It's more surface friendly than a chip seal. If you're in a residential neighborhood and you have a chip seal out compared to a slurry, and the kids go out on their bikes or their skateboards, if they've got a slurry down and they run across it and they happen to fall off their bike or their skateboard, they're not going to skin their knees too bad. If it's a chip seal, they fall off that bike or that skateboard, and they could end up with some rocks in their hands or on their knees. So this is why you want to put something down on top. The cons, the downside, it requires equipment that is less common than is used for a chip seal. Next. The HA5 is a treatment that the city has been using for a while. It has the high density bond in the emulsion that makes it a little more sturdy, keeps it tighter. It is able to hold to the aggregate a little better, The purpose, just like a slurry seal, to seal the cracks, to prevent the oxidation, and to combat oxidation from UV rays, which in Kingman you have a few. Next, please. So this is how the sun and water look down on the different treated type roads, the untreated asphalt, the conventional seals, and then you see the HA5. It extends the pavement life. It lowers the cost. There is no loose aggregate that can come apart and, be embedded in your children's knees or hands. The cons of it, the downside, is it has a life expectancy very short than the other ones. Typically, it's used on a local street because that's where you need it the most. Your local streets don't get much more than a trash truck, maybe a recycling truck, maybe a school bus on it. So it's perfect to put on a residential street. Next. So rubberized emulsion aggregate slurry seal. So this is termed as a RHMA seal. And basically it's crumb rubber from your tires. They're blended into this asphalt emulsion at a good temperature where it's not too hot, not too cold, but it just kind of is hot enough to make the crumb rubber kind of adhere. The upside is it can be applied cold, has a longer lasting color to it. So it doesn't fade out and go gray, it stays black longer. It has a high skid resistance and its life cycle is a bit longer. The downside, it's more expensive than a conventional slurry seal. There are a number of agencies I've talked to that have used RHMA. Most of them find it a good substitute for slurry seals, and at some point they may get a little bit of a lower cost when they use it. Mostly it's a little bit more than slurry, but sometimes they'll get a little bit lower cost on it. So it is a good treatment to use. Next. Microsurfacing it's a mixture of the polymer and the aggregates, and as it's mixed together, it forms this nice surface to it It almost looks like a slurry or something like that, but it's just a little bit better. It wears better. It's because it's got those polymers in it. It's keeping it black. It's keeping it in good condition. This helps prevent the raveling, the oxidation that we've been talking about, fills some of the minor flaws that are in the street, and it keeps that sealant closed and seals the cracks so that you don't have the water getting into the cracks. Next. And see on this, when we look at it, we have many more of the distresses that this covers. Fatigue cracking, flushing and bleeding, friction loss, and flushing and bleeding is not something you really want to have on your streets, because when it does get cool in the winter, it becomes very slick. And that's not a good thing for your traveling public. The only thing that it doesn't help is shoving. And shoving is the distress where if you have a little bit of a hill and you have a heavy truck going down it and it goes to stop, it's pushing the asphalt forward. So it's kind of shoving it forward, or it may be shoving it to the side. And so it's microsurfacing does not help for that distress, but it does help for all the other distresses. You do have to have specialized treatment to put this down, or specialized equipment to put it down. And it is more expensive than slurry or chip seal. But you do get a longer life. There are trade-offs. Next. Scrub seal. If you can imagine that you've got those cracks in your street, this seal actually goes down and they have a broom, not like we use at the house, but a big, long, wide broom that actually brushes this seal down into the cracks. So it's helping to fill up the cracks with this seal. So you've got that emulsion, the asphalt emulsion, some fine aggregate there, and with the cracks there, the broom sweeping all of that into the cracks. It does help to fill small cracks. It won't fill the large cracks very well, but it has the ability to prevent or prepare the pavement for other treatments. It also helps to get that dark color back that we want. And it's fairly cheap to use. Next. So with the scrub seal, we're only seeing a few of the distresses that it works on. Pros, it can fill up to a 1/2 inch wide crack. Cons may not be familiar to local contractors, requires tests to determine the best type of asphalt emulsion to use, and the pass emulsion is pretty expensive, and it sometimes is very hard to find. Next. Chip seals, you've probably seen these. They are the application of the emulsion with a truck coming behind and putting chips down on top of that. And then it's rolled. The good side of it is it protects your street. The bad side of it, it's really hard when the kids get out there and they fall on it. The other part is the traveling public, until it gets seated, those little rocks get seated in that emulsion, they have a tendency of jumping up as you're driving your car. So you could, somebody in front of you could flip up a rock that would crack your windshield. So it's a tough, it works well, but it's a tough thing to have in a residential neighborhood. The seal is non-load related. It does not seal the non-load related cracks, but it does improve the surface friction. Next. And so you see on this one, it's taking care of some of the fatigue cracking and the flushing. It uses common equipment. It can be open to low-speed traffic after the aggregate application. So after the little rocks have come out, traffic can be put on it. But you really need a very experienced contractor with it. You need to make sure that they're not putting down too too much aggregate for the emulsion that's there, or you could end up with those flying rocks. Okay, next, please. So a cape seal is the chip seal we just talked about, but on top of it, we're going to go put a slurry seal down on it. So you notice the little graphic on top of the picture, literally we're putting that chip down. Then we're taking the slurry and putting it on it that fills all the cracks around the rocks. So it restores the friction to your street. It seals the pavement against any water or materials getting in, and it does retard the reflection when you put an overlay around it. Okay, next, please. Cape seal, you see, except for the roughness, rutting, and shoving, it does pretty well. It extends the chip life by binding the chips and protecting it for the surface. It doesn't have any loose aggregate on it, so you don't have to worry about rocks being kicked up. And it does create a pretty dense surface to walk on or to drive on. But downside, it requires 2 times that you're going to get out in your area and put down the chip seal. And you've got to let that sit for a couple of days before you come back and you put the slurry seal down. So it does take a little longer to get a cape seal down, but it does hold up well on local roads, residentials, and some lower traffic collectors. Next. An asphalt rubber cape seal. So basically this is the cape seal, but we're going to put some asphalt rubber crumbs in there. Why? To give it that extra flexibility, to help it to get in those cracks and stay there. It also helps to reflect that cracking that's going to come up from the bottom. It is a higher cost when you go to construction, but with the pros on it, it almost outweighs the cons. Next, please. So by definition, a multi-layer surface seal is 2 or more surface treatments. And the reason you want to do something like this is to provide that benefit from each one of the treatments you're putting down to enhance the life, to prolong the life of that street. So an example might be a double chip with a slurry on top, a double chip seal. You could do chip seals with microsurfacing. There's a number of different ones that you have out there. Next. So this is what it would look like on a multi-surface seal. In the first picture, you see the first layer chip going down. Then you see the second one with the binder going down. And finally, you see another layer of materials going down. So it actually bonds the street very good and increases its surface life. Next. So a double layer surface seal, when you look at the double chip seal, so you see the one on the left, it looks a little grayer. Looks like it's worn a bit. But when you come back in, after you put that emulsion down and you put that second layer down, it's a smaller chip that goes in there, and then they roll it. So they're mashing those little bitty rocks in between the bigger rocks, and it provides a really good surface for you. Next. So these are just a couple of pictures of some others that are done. This is a double chip with a slurry seal on the left and a double chip with microsurfacing on the right. Next. Ultrathin bonded wearing course. I first heard about these about 15 years ago. They've been used back east for a number of years. And it is a fantastic treatment in my book, but you've got to have the right contractor and you've got to have the right materials to do it. And sometimes that gets hard. but it is a combination of the asphalt emulsion overlaid with the HMA, about 3/4 of an inch thick, and paved in a single process. This helps kind of bond that surface together. And I actually saw it done in one of the LA cities where they put it down on their arterials, and those arterials 7 years later didn't have a crack in them. It's very good, but it's hard to find the right person or the right contractor to do this for you. Next. So now, if you could put down a ultra-thin bonded wearing course or a TMO, thin maintenance overlay, you would hit every one of the distresses at least low, if not going into the medium and high on a number of them. So maintains overhead clearance and curb heights, bonds to the existing surface. Gotta love that. Doesn't require milling, so you don't have to have a milling machine out there, and it addresses all the surface distresses. But it does require specialized equipment, and it does have a higher material cost. Next, please. Rehabilitation and reconstruction strategies. So we've been talking about preventive maintenance. When the road is in pretty decent shape, it's 60, 65 PCI plus, we can do these things, and it will improve the life of the streets 4 to 7 years. Rehabilitation and reconstruction, we're going to take out what's there and put something back. Next, please. So there are recycling options: rubberized hot mix, cold in place recycling, cold central plant, and full depth reclamation. Next, the RHMA, or the rubberized hot mix asphalt, is a combination of the recycled tires and blended asphalt and an aggregate. So when you put it back down, the binder, there's 2 types of binders. You've got your asphalt rubber with a crumb rubber that's modified, and this is called a wet process. And then there's a terminal blend, which has the crumb rubber, and it uses a dense gradations. I always have a problem with that word, I'm sorry. Dense gradations of the rock. So it depends on how large and small that rock is. It is a good product. Once again, you may have problems finding a contractor to do it, but if you can, it's a wonderful treatment. Next. So the pros are resist reflection cracking with thinner layers than conventional hot mix asphalt, and it's environmentally friendly. It doesn't have to be quite as hot when it gets put down on the street. The downside, it's more expensive than conventional. Its temperature is sensitive, and it has potential for rutting concerns if the thickness is too small or too thin or too thick. The really nice sweet spot is about 2.4 inches. Okay, next. These 3 pictures you're seeing were done at the University of Davis Pavement Technology Research Center. And what they did is they put a weight on a wheel that ran across these areas as much as, 10,000 times going across it to show what the differences are between the cracking. So on the left, we see a 3-inch conventional hot mix asphalt. We see in the middle 1.5 inches hot mix or recycled hot mix asphalt. And then on the right, we see 1 inch of the RHMA. So each one of these can help the reflective cracking that comes through. And I'm sure you've seen it on some of your streets in the city. And it depends on the type of material, that your staff has decided with the treatment to put down. How many times can I go over that without the cracking coming up? Next. So here are the different looks. If you get up close and personal with the asphalt, this is the difference. There's a dense graded on the left, and you know, it looks kind of, it looks like somebody didn't quite compact it correctly. There's a little bitty, you know, divots in there. And then when you look below it, it shows you how the rock and the emulsion kind of tie together. The graphic in the middle is called a gap graded mixture, and notice it looks even rougher than the one on the left. And finally, there's an open grade mix, which is the one on the right. And that one is very pitted. So dense graded and gap graded, if you can get them, that's what you would want to do. Open grade, you may have some difficulties, but staff knows where to put those types of treatments. There are places in the city, they may work well. Next. Cold in place recycling. This is a treatment that literally they can, with a little train, and you notice in the picture, you see a lot of construction vehicles there, and these are put together in what's called a train. There'll be one in the front that kind of scoops up the asphalt out of the road, throws it back into a hopper where it gets jumbled up and crushed up, and then it gets another treatment put on it, and then it comes out the back where it's been kind of recycled. We're going to rejuvenate it, put it back down where it was, and then compact it or roll it. And very often, staff will go back and put a thin overlay on top just to finish it up or cap it. Next. So here you see how it all works. You've got that number one vehicle that picks it up and puts it into 2, and then it moves to 3. You can tell if you've got a lot of windy roads, this is probably not the treatment you want to do. But if you have some long roads, this is a way to stretch your paving dollars. I have seen it come in anywhere between 20 to 25% cheaper than doing a reconstruct on your street. So it's a way that you're not having to haul that rock out, that heavy truck going across your roads and deteriorating them, but still get a new surface in there. So there's some trade-offs there. Next. So this is what the surface would look like after it's been run through the mill, spit out the back, and compacted. It doesn't look bad. It looks pretty good. But like I said, some agencies will come back and put a thin overlay on top of it just to cap it off. Next. As this shows, the pros are 20 to 30% less expensive than a conventional mill and fill, saves money on milling and trucking and dumping and new material. It saves money there. It has shorter construction periods, yes, but that's okay. It is environmentally friendly. The downside requires the surface seal that doesn't have high air voids in it. Parking lots, not always the best. Residential chip seals, not always the best there. You've got turns and not long stretches you can use this on. Next. So cold in place recycling, what you can recycle. So notice we've got some cracks going across the street. We have some alligator in that middle picture, some distortions or writability issues, patches, dry and raveled. All of these kind of things can be put in that mill, added with some polymer modified emulsions and spit back out for a new road. Next. What we can't use when we do cold in place. You can't have paving fabric in there. You want to make sure that the base that you're going to be grinding up is in decent condition. You also want to make sure that the drainage on the street is in good shape. It doesn't like poor drainage. Next. So Cold Central plant recycling is basically the same kind of idea that we just talked about, except we're going to be moving the material that we pick up off to a plant off-site, and we're going to run it through. So we're going to be milling that existing asphalt. We're going to be recycling it with other polymers, and then or wrap, recycled asphalt pavement, and then we haul it back to the location where it came out of, put it down, and compact it. Next. So existing surface can be milled 2 to 4 inches. Milling truck transports to a nearby portable plant. It crushes everything up, puts the emulsion back in, and then that recycled mix heads back to be put down on the street again. Next. So pros, it is more expensive, it is less expensive. It does save money on milling and dump fees, provides a chance for subsurface and base stabilization. It is environmentally friendly. The cons are we've got to haul it off, and there can be air voids in there that we don't want to have. Next. Full depth reclamation. This is one I really like. It is a way that we don't have to reconstruct a street. If there is enough asphalt there, we can go in and, the contractors can go in and just pick it all up in this machine like you're seeing in the picture, and they're going to be recycling it in there, adding the polymers to it, putting a stabilizing type additive in there, and then they're going to go place it back down. Next. So this is what it looks like, the whole process. From the existing road, they're pulverizing, they're compacting, and then they are putting it back down. And notice in the last slide over, they come back and put an asphalt overlay on top of it. So they've strengthened the sub base, and they've made it a road that is nice and clean and almost back to new. Actually, it is back to new, excuse me. So it is also a really good treatment. Go ahead to the next slide. There are a few downsides to it, but not very many. You can use to stabilize it. You can use Portland cement concrete or Portland cement. You can use lime, and mostly I've seen lime being used. The asphalt emulsion, and they've actually got a foamed asphalt out there that they can put in here to make it bind together well. Next. So full depth reclamation is better than the other seals as far as what the lower cost will get. You can see up to 50% less expensive. Once again, it depends on that contractor if you can get them in though. It provides that when you put that stabilizer in there, you're strengthening what's there so your base is stronger now. It has shorter construction periods because everything's being moved very quickly around, and it doesn't expose the subgrade, which is what we don't want to happen. Now, downside, it does require an experienced contractor. You do have to know what material you can use for stabilization. Is it going to be lime? Is it going to be concrete? You have to know that. So you may have to have soils tests or other tests done so you can figure that out. Next. So I've given you some of the treatments that have been talked about. And as we start putting together the decision tree with staff and the unit costs that go with it, that will then become the basis for our analysis. Using that, wherever the PCIs are breaking, whatever that material cost is that we're going to have for that treatment, and their budget. So that will be coming up probably over the next several weeks as we start working with staff to do the analysis and to prepare the report for you. Now, this time, I get to turn some time over to the folks from Mojave County. And thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, we'll continue moving through this, and as Lisa said, that we'd like to give Mojave County a little bit of opportunity to talk. They are one of the partners that we use, and hopefully we can return the favor at some point in time. I use a lot of their cooperative contracts. They're always great in helping us do that. We also have a work share agreement with Mojave County, so we can trade work back and forth, or say in the case of our long line striping, this will be the second year that we're doing that program. And Mojave County actually puts down our long line striping. We used to do some of that in-house, but our truck was quite honestly not safe any longer. And they're very expensive for as much as we're gonna use it for. So Mojave County has stepped in and they actually apply the paint. We purchase the materials. And in the future, in some point in time, we'll have more to trade back and forth. But right now, we pay them outright for what they've done for us. It saves us a significant amount of money, and their team is always great to work with. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mojave County for a little bit, and then I'll do the closeout.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council members, city manager, staff. Thanks for inviting us to share some thoughts with you. My name is Sam Elters. I am currently the county manager and county engineer. My background is transportation. I know a few things about the subject. My experience is based on over 10 years with the county where I was involved in, I like to call it system preservation along with design and construction. Then about 10 years with ADOT, then about 8 years in the private sector and toll roads. And probably the one experience that I want to reflect on with you as well is the 3 years that I spent on the State Transportation Board. And I was on the board until just last October, so it's pretty recent, pretty relevant. I guess it's a pleasure to be with you, and I speak to you really from two folds. One is, as you heard from Jack, we are partners with you, the county and the city, and we're grateful for that and very proud of it. And second, as a city of Kingman resident. So I would say to you, your road asset in the city is probably the single most valuable asset you have. If it's not the single most valuable one, it's probably one of very few. So to that end, everything we built, or we build, or we inherit that is built as part of a subdivision or a development has a life cycle to it. Must be maintained. It doesn't survive forever. And so, hence the system preservation aspect of it. There is no one size fit all. You saw a lot of options presented to you by Jack, your superintendent, and by the consultant that shared some detailed information with you. But there's even more than all the information that was shared with you. One I did not hear is an overlay, where you do not have curb and gutters and you don't have any limiting features. And you have a road that you've had in place for years, and it's only got a couple of inches of asphalt when it was constructed. An overlay is not an is not an unreasonable solution. And let me assure you, the city is not unique in this challenge. Every entity, especially public, has those challenges. We have assets that are very valuable and we have to maintain. At least half a dozen of the board meetings that I attended while I was serving on the board, the State Board of Transportation was reminded that the state highway asset was upward of $300 billion if it was to be constructed from scratch. And we had to preserve it, and that's not an option. So doing nothing, unfortunately, is not an option. So it leads you to make, as a city council, make some difficult and painful decisions to find the resources to set aside so staff can apply it. And it's a two-way street. You're given feedback, you're given information, and it's best when it's grounded in reality and it's based on field conditions. And it could be as light as some of the solutions, the options you heard. Could be as light as what I call flush seal. It's just spraying asphalt on an existing pavement surface to rejuvenate it, because that's all it needs. It could be and then it goes from there to the slurry seals and the chip seals, and you can do some of the rehabilitation that you heard about. You can do a mill and fill, where if you have enough asphalt on the road, usually 2 inches of asphalt is not a good candidate to mill and fill because it's just not thick enough. When you mill, you want to leave enough asphalt so you're not breaking through it. Or you can do the overlay. You can also do a complete reconstruction. Usually when that is needed is when the pavement structural section, and we use that term a lot, I don't want to bore you with the technical, but it consists of the subgrade, the base that we put on top of it, and then the asphalt. In some places we use concrete, some places we use, but a minimum on any city street or county road, you'll find 2 inches of asphalt. That's usually the absolute minimum that you can start with. So it's really a menu of options, and that's what city staff will be presenting to you along with support and with the consultant support. As far as the system, I would really like to build, I think, on what staff is already doing and suggest to you consider what those annual needs are to preserve this valuable asset, and set aside just enough resources that it could be allocated between, I like to call it a hierarchy of roads within the network. So you have your arterials, such as Stockton Hill Road and the key ones. You have some collectors, probably like Willow and Harrison and others. And then you have the local residential streets. Each one of them is key. The residential streets are important so you and I can get to our homes. But then we need the collectors and the distributors to go on from there or come in off of them. So allocating some resources to those is essential in my humble opinion. And trust me, there are decisions to be made. Sometimes staff may look at 2 corridors and based on the resources you have, may come in and suggest a solution for one while deferring on the other if the deferment is going to make an existing condition that is no longer treatable with the preservation if it's going to need an overlay or reconstruction, letting it go a couple more years to take care of something that will deteriorate and changes phases in those 2 years would be, so that's where staff becomes so important and so valuable. Allocating whatever you, Madam Mayor, and the council see fit based on staff recommendation, whether it's whatever it is. It could be 70-30 for arterials and collectors versus residential, could be 60-40, could be 50-50, and it could change every year depending on what you hear from your staff. And then let me just end with, we do have, Jack alluded to a partnership we have with the city. Right now it's primarily striping and painting, and where the city provides the paint and we do the work or apply it. And I think it works. It's really a two-way street. It helps the city and it helps the county staff stay more in practice, because practice makes perfect, makes us more competent. And we do some chip seals, and let me just say, those are not the solution to every problem. They are solutions, and city staff may recommend some to you. We do some of those. We have the equipment. That would be an area we can certainly work with the city on, and we'll be happy to do it. I'm going to stop here because with me is Steve Latosky, and you all know him, and Steve is the Public Works Director. And he's in charge of the county roadway system network and system preservation. He can get I know he will get into more of the details, but I just really wanted to give you my perspective, just an overview. And I'm gonna stick around. If you have any thoughts or questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer them. After all, I am a member of the city and I do care. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
All right, thank you for having me back. So I got a couple more slides that I'll run through. We'll spend a little bit of time on them, but for the sake of being able to give some time for questions and answers within our time limit, I'm going to move through those fairly quickly. So make sure at the end, if you have more questions or need more detail, that you ask those questions, and I'll make sure I follow up.
Jack, just one question. Were we going to hear from Steve? Or
I'm sorry, if
I thought Sam was introducing
I may have
him.
misunderstood. I thought it was for questions. Steve, would you like to come to the podium? Absolutely, I will, sure.
Oh, that's okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, man.
That's okay. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, Mayor Miles, Councilmember Mello, Councilmember Walker, Manager Foggin, and staff. I'm Steve Latosky. I'm the Mojave County Public Works Director, and I must commend Manager Alters and County Engineer Alters for a very extensive presentation. He certainly has the credentials and the experience to share a lot of successes in his time, starting with Mojave County, as well as extending through his engagements with ADOT in the private sector. I don't want to take much of the council's time. I can share in about 2 to 3 minutes and focus on successes. And I must acknowledge as well, Jack and Rob, they're the best at what they do. They have seen treatments that have worked, and I do and can certainly say as their peer that their recommendations would carry a substantial amount of weight and can be trusted by the council and Manager Foggin as a good direction. I want to start with what people normally would conclude with, but there is no substitute for field inspection and verification by trained professionals, engineers, road superintendents on what is necessary for a particular road. I often use the analogy, every single road is like a different vehicle coming in for repair. The repair may appear to be the same between two different vehicles, but they need to be inspected independently of each other. And I say that because one of the successes that we have found early on is know the subgrade material that is underlying each street. In Mojave County, where we maintain 800 miles of paved roads, it varies considerably. We have soils that where road structures are laid on that are gravelly, very highly structurally sound. But then we have, as we get especially close to the Colorado River, we have clay soils, expansive clays, soils that just pale in comparison to what other types of gravel or just standard soils can hold. So know the subgrades. In fact, there's actually an ability perhaps to tap into USDA agricultural soil studies that are available on GIS to try to ascertain exactly what the subgrade picture looks like across the city. To that point of inspecting in the field, the county engaged a firm back in 2018 at a cost of $80,000 to actually drive and do a 3D laser scan 300 miles of those 800 miles that we maintain. We targeted our county highways and regional arterials for this pavement distress survey, which was carried out through this laser scan. It was fantastic. It left us not only with a scan and clear understanding of all of the pavement distresses, from the different types of cracking to the rutting, everything that would make up a typical analysis and inspection. We walked away with a full video log as well as a photo log of this scan, and at just $80,000, we're bringing this company back in the new fiscal year 2022, of course, pending our Board of Supervisors approving the budget and proposals such as this. But that may be something that the city would entertain augmenting. So that's another success that we had. Now, I came in as Public Works Director in the recession, and at the height of the recession. So the focus was on do more with less. And so I recharged and really invested our focus, namely, to our residential roads, and empowered our road division in really tuning up their bread and butter operation, that is their chip seal. So we do subscribe to the chip seal, pavement maintenance treatment. However, I wanted to approach this very holistically, very much broad brush, and we early on, about 2014, did what was called a smart request for proposals. We opened up and did a RFP that no other vendor contractor had seen before. What we did is we invited contractors far and wide to propose on pavement treatments that they found successful, that they could do, as well as what they could offer that may be somewhat leading practice. All we did, instead of fixate on a specific specification and maybe freeze out some innovative pavement treatments, what we did is we said, one, just propose, when you propose on a treatment, give us a state DOT or local government specification that represents that treatment. Provide us with either an engineering study or a university study that shows a treatment is proven in practice to work. And it was interesting. In fact, I commend the speaker previously for highlighting some of the treatments, because we actually found those treatments and did those treatments on the premise of the Smart RFP. We did the chip seal with fiberglass infused in the oil to provide for a structural absorbing membrane. What we have found that works largely, what we really like, is the rubberized chip seal, the chip seal that's infused with crumb rubber. And actually our vendor, I'll just say it was Cactus Asphalt, attests to and certifies to the fact that crumb rubber that's used is actually sourced from Mojave County waste tires. So we're taking Mojave County waste tires and actually putting it into asphalt oil that we're in turn laying down. Those are some lesser expensive alternatives that we found on our regional roads that have provided for a service life longer than a chip seal. Back to our residential roads in closing. We had some residential roads that were literally gone. And one of the things that we have found, and granted this is on roads that are largely very lightly traveled, we're talking less than 100 vehicles per day, maybe the tip, once a week trash truck. There is still opportunity in a chip seal treatment. But, and I know the speakers touched on this, the high-density mineral seal, we have used what was called, the trade name is Master Seal. HA5 is similar, but putting that over a chip seal immediately after could actually bring a badly deteriorated residential road, as long as it's on reasonable soil, good supporting soil, could potentially bring that residential road back into a serviceable condition. We did it for 20 miles of residential roads, which many had said were lost down in the Topak area. And 2 years afterwards, I'm still very happy with the end outcome. The Master Seal, or the HA5, does indeed succeed in preserving any loss of oxidation. So you kind of have two things in play: the oxidation as well as the overall sustainability of that weatherproofing chip seal. No, it doesn't add structure. I will attest firsthand that chip seals aren't supposed to provide any structure to a road. They're a weatherproofing application, but when done right and when it can be preserved, I'm not saying HA5 or Master Seal is needed on every chip seal or any other types of comparable pavement maintenance treatments, but nonetheless, when they're badly deteriorated like that, that combination we have found to be successful on roadways that have underlying sound subgrade soils. But with that, I'll call that the extent of my comments on some of the successes that we've seen. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, thank you, Steve. Mr. Foggin, I know we're getting close on time. Do we want to try and stick to that, or if I run over? I got just a couple more slides, and then I wanted to make sure we had plenty of opportunity, all right, for questions and answers. All right, next slide, please, Annie. All right, so this is just for discussion purposes only. This is the phase of the project that we are in currently with Lisa and her team, and that is selecting those treatments that fall within inside our decision tree. So as you can see, we have each of the condition categories broke down, and then as well the functional class. The price per square yard, the column with the dollar amounts in it, swings widely because there's a variation of treatments that are in there. Let's look at the very last line. On the residential side, it says spot patch and maybe a double chip seal versus a pulverize and repave or some type of reconstruction, which in the past we have found for at least the volume of work we've done was in the $100 a square yard price. So that's why those look like they swing so far. As well, what you're looking at, those are actually some of the units costs we're seeing now, not necessarily for the fog seal just itself, but when you factor in the striping and a lot of other things that come to those, these are the top end prices that we're seeing as arterial roads. As we get into the residential areas in the lower neighborhoods, those prices decrease, and that's why those swing. Excuse me. So I just wanted to give you a chance to kind of see, again, this, Lisa just got this, and this was just a starting point for us to start having the conversation. And we can talk about a couple of them. Crack sealing is, like Lisa said, a really important tool. We want to keep that water intrusion down. So you see that across the board. And as we go down, there's a lot of considerations that we're trying to take in. Some of those are cost, not to quote "Oh brother, where art thou," but we are a geographical oddity at times. So some of those treatments that you see are available to us, but we're going to have such a sufficient volume that they'll want to come here. If not, the mobilization cost outweigh the savings that you see from those. So recycling, we've actually, and to Steve and his credit, they started down that road with some questions on wrap for recycling, for chip material, and they had a company that came up that we actually ended up going all the way to California and seeing one of those paving trains. They're awesome. They really are neat. You can see we get kind of giddy when you're talking about different asphalt preservation methods, but it really is impressive. They pick it up, they mill it, they screen it, they run it through a pug mill right in the same unit, spit it on the ground, and they pave it right back down. That's real basic in it, but they are neat. So you don't see some of those in here yet. As time goes on and we secure those funding mechanisms that allow us to do those types of projects, you'll see more of those slide down into our decision tree. As well, one of the things we were trying to do is we're trying to pull the level of treatment back as far as we can. One is cost, two is also cost, but it's related to ADA. We know we need to make improvements to our ADA network in certain portions, and actually one of the subsequent phases to this project will be to actually inventory our ADA facilities, because we can tie these two programs together inside of the same software. That being said, there's certain treatments that as soon as you do that treatment, it's called an alteration. It's no longer a preventative maintenance treatment. They call it an alteration, and it triggers the DOJ, the Department of Justice requirements to make improvements to your ADA facilities if they don't meet a specific standard. So some of those treatments you've seen, we've tried to stay under that requirement. When you're talking cape seals or you're getting the micros, you're actually triggering that alteration requirement. And so you've seen we've spent a pretty decent amount of money on Andy Devine, and we're continuing that up the hill and working into town trying to improve those facilities that don't meet those current standards. To Mr. Elters was mentioning having two different criteria almost, and so you're trying to attack your arterials and collectors and keep those in good condition while also focusing some energy and some funds onto your collectors, or I'm sorry, your residentials. And so that's actually something that is, again, part of this project in the budgeting scenarios. What we want to do, we've done at a project level, is when you get a report out currently from our program, it says, you know, do 5 roads here and 5 roads there. Next year, you're coming back to the same neighborhood. We don't want to do that. That's an inconvenience to the residents. It costs us money because everywhere the contractor has to go, they're giving, you know, there's cost to that. And so we want to take more of a neighborhood approach. And then that neighborhood approach will mostly be related to residentials. And then you'll see almost a secondary program is what I have in my head, and these are the items we're working through. Keep in mind, this is discussion purposes, is you'll see almost another program that will focus arterial collector. We all know how important our arterial collectors are, and that's why they've been our focus the last couple of years based on the amount of funding we have. Once we get those tied in, we'll be able to run those budget scenarios on both of those and say, okay, well, you know, we need to spend, as Mr. Elters was mentioning, maybe 70% goes to arterial collector and 30% goes to residential. Whatever those numbers come at. And ultimately, my plan is to bring back policy to the city council that will help drive and continue once we've identified how to fund those and make those programs work. We'll memorialize those into a policy. Next slide, please, Annie. So I just wanted to talk a little bit for the in-house chip seal. This is actually a snapshot out of one of the work plans for one of the chip seals that we've done, our last chip seal, as a matter of fact. And I've taken all the phone numbers and last names out so you can just see the amount of manpower that's required. We have some of the equipment. It's getting old. We don't have boot trucks. We always sub that out, and we have a distributor truck come in and do the application for us. That being said, we've actually moved away from it for a number of reasons. The personnel being the main component of that. It's just very labor intensive, and we don't have enough staff. If you look at this, I think it was 16 people, 17 people including PD that came out and helped us. We don't have enough personnel just in street department to man all these positions while we're doing a chip seal. So a lot of it we actually subbed out, and this one you can see we subbed out the traffic control and the trucking, which still works out. But still, we have 17 people. We don't have that many people in the streets. So what we end up doing is we borrow from water, wastewater, parks, all these other departments and divisions. And I mean, we're really close to putting Annie on a roller this last time. But the problem we've ran into is the expectation, the scope, and the level of services being requested from the departments. It's difficult to pull somebody out and keep them off of that job for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. This project itself was 2 weeks. Straight through. That doesn't include all the pre and post work that goes into that, because we do a lot of patching and shoulders and prep work getting ready to move into that phase. And then afterwards, a lot of sweeping, cleanup, just, you know, that's the lesser side of it. Really the post work, or I'm sorry, the pre-work and the work itself are very labor intensive. So we've moved away from that. There are potential opportunities. We've had conversations with Sam and Steve both for potential for utilizing the IGA. There's some challenges to that for everybody. They have a pretty robust program, so they'd be trying to fit us in. They've always been willing to help us, so it's something we can definitely continue to look at jointly. If we were to look to move on to try and continue doing it in-house, the labor is going to be the big portion of that. That also comes down to safety. A lot of times we're stealing people from other departments and divisions and we're putting them into live traffic. We're having them running a piece of equipment that they may not be accustomed to in live traffic. So we felt this last round that we've started to move toward contract pricing. As well, some of the treatments and chip seal, as you can see in our decision tree or our proposed starting point, chip seal has a place. We know it has a place. If we're going to look at it in-house, we got a lot of other things to look at. Maybe that's the partnership with Mojave County, or if we were going to look at doing that in-house, we're looking at some equipment needs, some capital needs, and the personnel needs. The equipment itself, you're probably looking $1 million and a half if we were to run a whole program ourselves, and just the personnel to run that, just the additional personnel, not running the program as a whole, but enough people that would be on the crew, you're looking over $300,000 a year just in salaries. So there's a lot of things that we can look at, and that's kind of how we've walked ourselves into having it subbed out. Next slide, please, Annie. So we can come back for questions on that, but I just wanted to cover the last slide I have here. So one of the items that has came up a couple different times is MAG 336. So we have adopted the Maricopa Association of Government standards and specifications. We do have some addenda that have been added to those in the form of City of Kingman standards and specifications that make it more, maybe there's items that we do a little bit differently, say water, sewer, whatever. And so we've added those into the City of Kingman addenda. This one is specific. I put a lot of text there. I apologize. I'm not going to read it to you. But what it means, if I am a utility or a developer or contractor and I go out and I need to cut more than 300 feet of asphalt, at that point, then it triggers that I'm going to go back and do half the street essentially with, or the lane, you can read in there, you're going to do a slurry seal over that portion. There is an opportunity. It is already adopted. We have not utilized it really in the past. Mojave County does to some extent, and actually it could be a question we could ask them as well. I've reached out to other cities in the valley, and I did find some of them are using variations of this. They've adopted their own, and a lot of those are related to their, like in a moratorium on asphalt cuts when you have a new road. You don't necessarily want it being chopped up, so they require that if it's cut, you have to come back and do the length of the patch, the width of the road. There's a lot of different variations. Excuse me. So with this one, it's probably the biggest impact you would see would be city utility, but that being said, it will affect all utilities that are going to be making cuts, whether it's for development or whether it's for regular maintenance, as well as maybe the developments, say for curb or for utilities as well. And with that, that is all my slides, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. I didn't bore you to death, did I?
No. I guess this is a lot of information, of course, to absorb, and I feel like I could be part of the road maintenance team now. But I guess my question is, because we had a long list of types of seals, and then Sam kind of narrowed it down to just, a few that he liked, and so did Steve, the rubberized chip seal and then just various, the master seal over a chip seal and HA. As you're doing this analysis, do you find that you're getting, I've seen our road map with all the red lines on it that show the poor condition of a lot of our roads. Are there areas that that seem to just kind of say it's not an 80-20 rule, but that a majority of our streets are going to have a certain type of need, or is it really spread all over the spectrum of these types of applications?
So it'll be done by condition category. So in a real basic sense, If it's red and it's a residential, it'll fall into this particular treatment. Maybe that is a chip seal with a surface seal on it, or maybe we're looking at a cape seal, or whatever that ends up being. If it's red in an arterial, it'll fall into that group. If it's red in a collector, it'll fall into that column. Annie, can you pull that screen? That'd be a good visual to kind of help.
If it's red in a collector, it would fall into what?
I'm gonna have Annie pull up the
Okay.
the sample decision tree we had there. While she's pulling that up, I'll just, oh, here we go. It'd be one of the last slides there, not the example one, down further. Keep going, I think it's, I can tell you actually. Maybe I can't tell you. It is slide 67. Annie's getting aggressive with that keyboard over there in here, banging on it.
Overlay. Well, I
Almost
guess I'm
there.
looking for where would it fall into, when does it fall into these rehab and reconstruction?
So that's really, the treatment is that, and that's really based on the condition category. So the further up you are in the PCI, you're gonna be in preventative maintenance type treatments. As we fall down the scale, when you start getting into maybe the 3 category, 4 and 5, we know the 3, some of those, really all those are gonna be some type of rehabilitation. We're trying to bring that down, and we're using a minor treat or a lesser treatment in there. So you can look at, like, let's use residential as a good example. Residential, non-load related, the third or the second one down, we have liquid road or HA5. Those are 2 different seal coats, topical. They seal the surface, maybe, not maybe, they're gonna stop some of the oxidation. We're gonna do crack seal. And so when you look, say if you look at condition category 2, and that's a yellow road. In the real basic sense, all those yellow roads that are a residential, condition category 2, we're gonna go do that treatment on. That being said, like I said, we at the project management level are gonna go out to each road and say, yeah, that makes sense. Or we're looking at it, you know what, it's actually a little better than we thought. Even though we did the inventory, we think we can get by, and we're just gonna back that out and do a fog seal or a crack seal. Or we get out there and realize, wow, we had a lot of patches. We end up with a lot of patches between utilities. And you go out there and you realize, man, this road is actually in worse shape than we have since we did the inventory, because it's had so many patches afterwards. And we may get out there and say, now we're gonna take it from a surface seal and we're gonna bump that up to a chip seal or a slurry or some other type of treatment. And that's gonna be true across the board. You're gonna see that for residential, you're gonna see that for collector, and for arterial. And you go out and you see an arterial, let's use the same condition category 2. You go out, you look at it, here we got slurry or micro placed. We look at it, we go out, again, we say, wow, you know, this road has a lot more traffic on it and the deterioration has occurred quicker, or we've had patches, or wow, it's held up better. We're gonna select the right treatment for that. We're always looking to get the best value out of the dollars that we're spending. We're looking to get the best life cycle and the best value for the dollar that we spend on it.
It sounds like there's quite a few more options on the preventive strategies for the type of treatment that you use.
There are lots and lots of treatments out there. It changes weekly, monthly. It really does. The industry is moving. There are some staples that have been out there for a long time. Chip seals, overlays, those sorts of things. Many of those treatments that you've seen in Lisa's portion of the presentation, high-density mineral bond, that's right out here. We did that in a number of areas. Downtown, we did it in some residential areas. We've seen good performance out of that. The bonded surface wearing course, that's actually Stockton Hill. We did that project. It was a thin overlay from Andy Devine up to Detroit Avenue. Again, seen decent really good performance out of it. We see some cracking, but the road was a little more cracked out than we typically like to see, but we're kind of behind the 8 ball, so it was either that or we add another $6 to $7 per square yard to move that to a thicker mill and fill. So we're always looking at those treatments. I can manage the cracks when they're not huge and they're able to be sealed and not provide or cause some type of structural deficit to the roadway.
Thank you. Sure.
I think the consultant put a great slideshow together. I think it was a little too intense. You know, we probably could have picked what you guys think and maybe what the county thought to show us. First of all, I'd like to say, I think we have a funding problem still. I think we need to get you more money to take care of all of our assets. We heard that it's probably our biggest asset we have, and we need to be taking care of it. And my other question, or I have several, would be, who does our inspections? Are you guys doing those, or are we subbing those out to a third party?
The asphalt inspection or which
The road
inspections?
inspections, when we're doing your map here.
Okay, so this is actually part of what Lisa and her team have done, and that was, we actually, what Steve was referring to, we had a van that came into town, you drive it, has some lasers on it that helps us pull some information. They got cameras, they can go back and look at it, and then we went 2 steps further, really. Once they pull all that information in, they have part of their team, one of their techs come back, and they actually do some QC in the field. And Lisa can always fill in any gaps for me, but they do QC in the field. And that way, if you drive the van over a road and it says it's a 40, they come out and they do a visual rating. That's based on the ASTM standard. And it's the people that they send out are certified raters, because you got to be careful. You don't want to be subjective. You know, I rate it one way, you rate it another. And so those certified raters go through a program where 2 people rate it. You got to come in within, say, 5 PCI of one another. And then they pull that into the system, and then to go one step further, once that's in, they come back and they pull additional roads out and they inspect those as well. So NCE is the consultant we're using currently.
Is that somebody we use every year, or is that like a once in a 5-year deal, or what's the rotation on them coming in and bringing the van in and giving us a rating on the roads?
Ideally, we have not done it every year. So the last update we did, or not update, the implementation of the program was 2015. Okay. So we're going to see this, we didn't do it year after year, but you're going to see some variation of that. You'll probably see where we're doing about 1/3 of our network. And what that'll actually, what I have in mind at this point, and keep in mind, this is just for conversation purposes, is we'll check all of our arterial collectors and 1/3 of our residential. So every 3rd year, all of our residentials have been done, but we're keeping a good eye on what our arterial and collectors are doing.
Okay. And then I have a couple questions for Steve, if he could answer. Who's doing your guys' inspections? Is that in-house, or are you guys using a consultant like we are, or?
Mayor Myers, Councilmember Walker, we conduct our pavement inspections in-house. It's more of a windshield survey type inspection, but we do complete all 800 miles of roadways in 1 year. So we go out every single year and complete that inspection. The windshield survey does lend to not potentially capturing every single, especially the smaller distresses. That's why we have opted one, to bring an outside outfit out. We'll do it again in about 3 years afterwards. I didn't mention this before, but I had actually put together a custom rating, if you will, that is based on the forecast serviceability of our roadways, basically comparing the pavement structure, what it was designed to support for traffic load over the course of time, and then comparing that to what it was actually subjected to. But I still profess that there is really no substitute for actual infield inspections, and that's what helps us really tune into those roads that we know we have to look at and prioritize for a treatment.
And when you guys are chip sealing, how big's your crew?
Our crew is very similar to what Jack had laid out with regard to providing for a distributor truck operator, chip box operators, as well as those that are trailing the chip box. The key is you have to have rollers, and you have to have the right equipment out there. We like to use at least a tandem, if not 3 rollers at a time. So it's about the same size crew.
Okay, I appreciate it, thank you.
You're welcome.
And then,
Could I add, oh,
oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, I just wanted to add on to that a few questions. So I want to make sure I understand about, you said you had someone come in and with the laser scans
Correct.
of all of your roads. When was that?
That was in 2018, and we anticipate bringing them back in 2021.
And they gave you information on the base and the quality of the road?
It would only be a scan of the surface, so to help us understand the stresses and to make intelligent decisions. Essentially, they process all of the video data through a software and applied the industry, standards, leading standards, to develop what is commonly known as that pavement condition index, a PCI.
Okay, so you do have that analysis?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and does it result in something like, I know we've seen as a council for several years now, or the map that shows the different color-coded?
That's correct, yes.
So you have that too?
Yes, it was very enlightening, because what we were finding time and time again is that even though from an analytical standpoint, we saw some of our roads be past their structural service life, they weren't really appearing as such. In fact, we reasoned that about 50% of our regional highways and arterials were at or above their remaining structural service life. So they really were deserving of rehabilitation, but the stresses weren't indicating that. So we brought this company in, and we found out only about 7% of our roads were of poor PCI. These are the regional roads, so not the residential. So,
okay.
But it helps us make intelligent decisions and help us balance where the money and treatments need to go.
And then I was wondering, I know you do a lot of the chip seal, and it sounds
Yes.
like you do the rubberized chip seal.
That we bring in with the contractor. A contractor does deliver the rubberized chip seal. See, there's a special plant that's kind of necessary on site. They actually infuse a crumb rubber with the oil just before it's laid down. So that is a contractor delivered. We actually do it through what's called a capital pavement preservation program, steered more towards our regional roadways, because that does lend for a structural absorbing membrane. But I'm happy to say, thanks to the HERF revenues, having really been bolstered over the last few years. The county is doing about 100 miles of chip seal now in-house, but bear in mind that helps us. We finally met the annual cycle, the cycle about delivering a chip seal every 7 years. 7 to 10 years is what agencies try to strive for, so we finally met that this recent fiscal year.
And is that in both residential and regional?
That's correct. It's a cross between that. Now, we haven't invested, even though we do the windshield survey, we inspect all of our paved roads, we haven't invested contract resources more to ascertain PCIs and that. We have a great skilled road crew, just like Jack does. When our people see things, they're working out in these residential areas constantly. We get a pretty good feel for what needs to be looked at in more the near term, and what can be, more maybe put off for another year or two. So we make our decisions more with just boots on the ground, visual inspections with the proper professionals, and we've been successful in treating those residential roads that way.
Do you bring contractors in for anything other than rubberized chip seal?
Yes. Well, we've tried some other pavement maintenance treatments successfully. It was called Fibermat with the fiberglass infused asphalt oil. And then we have undertaken some special projects for a total reconstruct. We have 2 miles of Vanderslice Road that we actually, I don't believe this is, well, actually there has been a couple of examples, but we did what's called roller compacted concrete. It is pricey, but it's more shooting for a 40 to 50 year pavement solution on a section of Vanderslice Road that was subject to heavy commercial and industrial type traffic that literally resulted in asphalt pavement that was totally rutted out and in dire need of replacement. A chip seal could never resurrect it. So we milled it out and actually just completed it last week, phase 2 of the, it's a real beautiful project, and hopefully a pavement option for us. a low price, you will deliver a very, very long service life with very little pavement maintenance in between. That's the other advantage of concrete. But we usually don't delve into concrete solutions, but we really thought that was a good approach for that particular road.
Perfect.
Mayor?
Thank you, Steve.
Thank
Go ahead.
If we could get Jack back up to the microphone, I've enjoyed listening to what the county does, but I'd love to explain more of what we're doing, so.
Well, I think the analysis between the partnership is a good one, though.
Yep,
Thank you.
absolutely.
While Jack is heading back to the podium, if I might interject one thing, Madam Mayor, in what's being talked about between the different types of inspection, there are 3 types of inspection that are out there. Walking, which is your most accurate. Windshield, you're driving 15 to 20 miles an hour and collecting distresses. And the automated or semi-automated, depending upon the consultant you get, your PCIs could be off from your walking as much as 40 points plus or minus. And that's a huge difference. So when you go out and you look for that consultant, you want to make sure in automated, you want to make sure that they're pretty accurate. It sounds like the county has one. I know that what we've put together with our control sections and our re-inspections has helped us to bring the PCI variances down to about 5 points. But that's the biggest thing, the differences between the 3 types of inspections that are used. Thank you.
Thank you.
So to go back to what we're showing here, we've used chip seal in a lot of places, and we're using chip seal again. What you're going to see this year, though, is we're actually doing the scrub seal version. The roads are broken up really bad. They weren't conducive to going out and doing like you typically would with a chip seal, where you crack seal, give it a period of time, and then you come chip seal over it. That's why we opted for the scrub seal in these. They are more difficult. They're really kind of a pain in the neck because you're dragging that trailer behind you. I know Steve and his team has done some of them. The trailer brooms that oil down into those cracks, so you can fill some of the smaller ones instead of having to go crack seal them all. The bigger ones, like Lisa indicated, you still do, but then it also takes a lot more application of rock when you're putting your aggregate down, because if you have a dip in the road, we found we made a mess when we did it for the first little bit, because you're going along, everything's great, your application rate is like you're using when you're doing a typical chip seal, and then there's a little divot in the road from a sink utility patch or something, so you leave a pool of oil there, you don't put enough rock to cover it, and you move down the road, and then every roller and dump truck just drove through that pool of oil. And so it becomes more difficult there. It's really, we had some good success in it. I should have brought some pictures. We actually used that on Eastern, and at the time Eastern was, hey, hold it together for a couple of years, we think we're going to be able to do the improvement project, and it just hasn't made it there. But it's held up really well for as bad as it was. I got some side-by-side pictures and some pre and post pictures that it really worked out well. Fog seals, you guys are seeing those go down right now. We're actually using a PMRE. It has some rejuvenating in it, and it's just, we're running like 12/10 of a gallon of oil, and we're spraying that down over the surface. There's no aggregate or nothing applied to that, and that just seals the surface, stops the rattling. As you're driving down the road, look in the gutter line. You see a lot of rock and sand. Some of that is, maybe if you have undeveloped areas, but if you're driving somewhere that has landscape on both sides and there's rock, that's the road going into the gutter. And so, believe it or not, sweeping is actually a really important part of our pavement preservation program, because what happens, you have aggregates that are laying on the surface and cars are driving over those, and it's just pounding those aggregates in, and it tears up your surfaces. So if you look, you guys have probably seen them and didn't realize what it is. You see an area that has a lot of turning movement, and you'll see the surface is really raveled. You'll see a lot of the aggregates sticking out of the top, the larger aggregates, and the fines have pulled away from it. That's why. The HA5, the TRMSS, same thing. Surface seal, it's going to hold the top together. It's going to seal the water. It's going to keep any water intrusion out, and then it's going to give us a nice dark surface. HA5, again, that's a great example of it. Whatever product you use, we're not necessarily specific. We say HA5 in here, but there's a lot of other products that have the same performance. And that was a proprietary name from them, because they give you a 5-year warranty on the the holdup on that. The downside to that particular product is they typically want to apply it a little higher in the PCI range. They're always looking for that 70 mark because they know you got a good solid road that the treatment's going to give you good value. But we've had some success in getting those down into some areas that were lower PCI that had some raveling or weathering on the surface, and it stopped that and gave a nice surface. We were looking, if you look down there a little further into the condition category 3, we got the ultra-thin bonded wearing course, and that one's kind of a toss-up. I do like the product. It is, for us, it's almost aggregate to aggregate. So you don't have a lot of voids that are going to rut or move or anything else. The cracks do really well. It does really well with the reflective cracking. So if you have a crack, you got 5 inches asphalt, we mill 2 or 3 off, and you pave over it, that crack's coming back. It won't go away. It's a matter of time and how long, based on loading and the condition of your base material. Is it a working crack? Is it thermal? Is it because it's hot and cold? All those items weigh into how quick that crack comes back. But we have that placed on arterial, and when you get down to the collectors, then that's where we're getting down to the chip, maybe a scrub seal with a surface seal. And so Steve had shared some pictures of some areas that they use a surface seal, and he had talked about that. And HA5 does something similar, and again, just mentioning their name. What is unique to those guys is it's actually made at the airport. They're actually made in our industrial park. The chip seal, what we'd do is, if we went that route, if that's what we choose to do, we lay that chip seal down, and then we come back with that HA5. That does 2 things. Let's just say seal coat of some sort, so I'm not using just a name, but you lay down that seal coat over the chips, and that's going to fill in some of those voids of the chips, give you a little smoother surface, plus it's going to stop the oxidation of your emulsion, and it's going to give you a better retention on your chips. So you're not going to see the chips peeling out over time. We try and put enough, the goal is to put enough oil down. You don't have a lot of that. But with traffic, it wears on that and moves on those aggregates, and you're always going to get some aggregate loss. That'll stop that. And so you can see we actually got a pretty decent amount of area where you're seeing chip or scrub seal, or even all the way into maybe a double chip. We did some work with a double chip, a road that was pretty low PCI. It was in really bad shape. It was actually in the Camelback area. We came in, we chip sealed it. We went off, chip sealed everything else in the neighborhood. This was in that last project we did, and then came back and put a subsequent chip over it. It's holding up really well. So we still see areas where we could use those. One of the other considerations that we add in that we've tried or would like to address is we're going rideability as part of it. Chip seal doesn't fix that. So if you got a rough road, Fairgrounds is a great example of that. There was some sub-base problems long time ago. It was raining. I got about 3 different stories from people that have been here in the department for 20 plus years. Anyway, you drive down the road, it doesn't look terrible. It's not cracked up. There's some rough patches in some portions of it, but it's really rough. You really notice it if you're in a piece of equipment, it wants to buck you out of the thing. Chip seal doesn't solve that. So again, when we're going back and we're looking at doing a treatment, we're not only looking at the surface, we're actually trying to do a improvement maybe to the rideability as well. Drainage, we get beat up on drainage a lot. We got some old subdivisions that came through and they got paved in some form or fashion that didn't have plans that went along with them addressing the drainage. So one of the items that we attempted, this was when the TPT was repealed, is there was a big portion of area we were actually going to go pulverize, and it's kind of a variation of what you saw in Lisa's slides. We would actually go pulverize it, and then we'd use some type of a penetrative chip and double chip it. So we'd lay one chip down with a, it may not be an emulsion, but a binder that would soak into the surface a little bit, hold those chips, and then we'd come back and put another chip. What's nice about that is when we pulverize it, then we have to come back and shape it. So we're compacting it and we're shaping it with a blade and again, and so if we have low spots or we have areas that don't drain well, it's crowned where it should be a super and flow all the way across the road, we can address those items. So some of the other considerations that go into there are ADA, drainage, rideability, not only, hey, we can throw a chip or a surface seal on it and solve just keeping the road together.
I think we've gone over our time limit, but
No, I think it was 4 to 6.
oh, was it? Okay.
But anyway.
The treatment we just did on Gordon, what was that? That was a fog.
Fog
right?
seal.
Now, do we need to seal, Did that seal the cracks and everything?
No, we actually had crack seal. Typically, you'll do your crack seal ahead of your fog seals,
So it
chip
was already
seals.
done.
So we did a crack seal in the wintertime,
Okay.
and then we moved into the spring is when we started applying surface treatments.
Yeah, I'm good. I just think we need to find them some more money.
I agree.
I don't know if staff can bring us in, or if we need to give them something, or how we're
We're
going
going to discuss that in
Yeah.
budget, I'm sure. But I want to, if it was supposed to be over at 5:30, I apologize.
It's all good.
It's all good. Well,
It's all good.
I only turned into a pumpkin at 8.
we have got a lot of information, and so thank you very much. And thank you for all the sharing of knowledge and for the work that
So,
you
Mayor,
do.
just one kind of final thought that I don't want to let go before the council recognizes. One of the things that Jack talked about, well, first of all, I want to acknowledge Councilor Walker's statement that money is, the revenue side of this is the piece that's going to be the most important.
Yeah.
Because these treatments are extremely important, and for the entire road system, we certainly cannot address the entire road system, and I think that's been clear for the council. And so the fact is that we're going to be bringing forward a policy on what roads we take care of and which roads are not going to get attention. That's just the world we currently live in, is we're going to have to acknowledge that arterial and collectors are more important than residential streets, because that is your lifeblood to your community. Your economic driver is your collector on arterial roads. And so you're going to see that in the policy that we bring forward. PCI, I think, is something that we absolutely have got to be continuing to talk about as part of our performance measurements. How we're looking at our roads is critical on how we're spending the money on our roads. And I think I want to acknowledge Jack and Rob and the team for looking at best practices, and really for looking at PCI and setting goals, and looking at considering policies that they can actually achieve what the council wants, as well as what the money can provide or can do. And that's a credit to Jack and Rob and the team for looking at all the different mechanisms there are to take care of our roads. And so with that, that will be something that you'll be seeing. We will be talking about revenue sources, as we have been over the last couple of years. And I hope no one's surprised to hear that we're definitely going to need a dedicated revenue source moving forward to tackle these challenges, because they're not going, as has been pointed out by all the professionals, that these roads aren't going to get better over time. They're going to get worse. So, thank you.
Thank you. And I don't think any of us are surprised at your statements or that need. I'd also like to thank you for working the good partnership that the city has with the county, and for, as demonstrated here this afternoon. I really appreciate that. We all do. And it's good to know, and it's good for the public to know how closely aligned the conversations are, and that we have really great professionals working together at all levels to help us with this issue, our greatest asset. So is there anything else that anyone would like to say?
I would just like to thank the county for Sam and
Yeah.
Steve showing again. I can't say how much it means for them to come here and spend 2 hours of the day with us,
You bet.
and the staff and everybody. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
I agree. So as this project wraps up, we'll be coming back to you with a department report. We don't have any numbers, or I don't feel comfortable sharing what things look like yet, because we're still going through and validating data and making sure everything's good. We're going to move, after this conversation, we're moving into the development of our decision tree, and then also trying to break out some budget scenarios and some approaches that maybe we can improve things from what they are or make it better to the residents or whatever that is. And then ultimately, like I say, our goal is to bring back some policy. We may or may not have those ready for you when we come with the data. Probably better not. We'll just better off not doing that. We'll bring the department report, let you know where our system is and what we're looking at. And then at that point, that'll help us drive those policies forward. That'll give you some time to chew that over. And with that being said, I'm with you guys. I really want to thank Sam and Steve for coming here. They are great partners and allies. They help us out significantly. We do a lot of R&D, not research and development, rip off and duplicate, and a lot of that comes from those guys. So I do want to thank them. And then as well, I'd like to thank Lisa for providing some information for you guys tonight.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you, Lisa. Motion to adjourn? Oh, we don't need one. We're adjourned.
Thank you guys very much.